All right, hello, Kinesiology 4120. This week we're going to go through facilities and management. We're going to go through some of the administrative processes that fall into the profession of strength and conditioning. We'll go through some laying out a facility. We'll talk about different administrative roles, and we'll talk about some of those action plans, safety protocols, everything kind of we need to know outside of strength and conditioning that falls into running a facility and managing one effectively and safely for our athletes. So we'll start with the facility design process. This normally takes somewhere around 2 years to create a facility. This is an example. All of the example facilities here are large scale facilities. You may work at a small scale facility, but it is normally around a 2-year process, especially at a university. So to start, we want to go through the pre-design phase. This is about 6 months of really designing what we want. We do a needs analysis similar to what we do with our training programs. We create a needs analysis for our facility as well, looking at the different sports, looking at the different needs, looking at how you design your programs, different implements you may require, and the space available. Then you go into our feasibility and our costs, looking at the location, the size, what's really available for what you need and what's available to you. And then we create a master plan with all of those project goals and set everything in motion to begin with an architect and start designing the facility down to a T so that it can be built and built exactly how we need it to be and how we can have it feasible. Okay, now with that facility design, we go through that design, go through our finalization. At the university level, you need a committee. This is a longer term process because we do have to work with different administrative processes throughout the university and meet all of those guidelines, meet all the requirements, all of the safety, the health codes, and go through a fit for the athletes, because if you're working with large scale teams, you may need more. If you're working with smaller teams, smaller groups, you may not need as much, and you may want to design it for better flow, depending on how many athletes you can have in that facility, how many you can have at one time. You want it to be easy, you want it to fit, and you want it to be feasible for your groups. Okay, so now we're in that design phase. We're now going into construction. This is normally somewhere around a year process, around 12 months, to really go through the full construction of the facility, making sure it fits the master plan, fits the goals that you put out and that the university is allowing, making sure that we're adhering, making sure we're hitting those deadlines. It's always recommended that we set standards for our architect and set penalties if we're not keeping that schedule, because we need to make sure that this is on a timely manner, because we are a growing program, or you may be in a growing program. You want to be able to give the best quality of training, the best quality and safety when it comes to these athletes and their development and the university's development. Okay, and now you do need to make sure that you show up. It's not just kind of let them do it on their own. Make sure that you're checking in, checking up, and staying on top of the full construction phase, because the more frequently you're there, the better presence you have, the more likely things get done and get done correctly. And if your architect has any confusion, any questions, they can see you and they can ask you those questions so that you make sure that everything is done how it should be, up to code, and making sure that it's exactly how you want and how you designed. Right, now we go into the pre-operation phase. This is kind of getting everything started. This is where you select and you're hiring your staff, or you're selecting equipment, building equipment, taking in what you can, planning for staff development, continuing education, especially if you are the one who can bring in your staff or bring in your own staff, hire your new staff. Who are you going to hire? Where are you going to pull from? And then how are you going to continue to develop your staff? We in strength and conditioning, we don't stop learning once we get a job. We have to continue that learning process to continue and improve, finding ways to do that within your staff to improve your staff, your assistants, your interns, your graduate assistants, and develop continuing education processes, because your certification requires it, as well as you need it to give a better quality product to your athletes, to create the most value you can. Okay, so how do we go through a safe and successful design of our facility. First, we need to make sure there's supervising locations. If you can't see your athletes very often, there's a problem. You need to be able to supervise even if you are doing something else, especially if you have open hours in your facility. Make sure access is available for all individuals, making sure you're up to code with different disability standards, and making sure that there is access for everyone, making sure it's often first floor, no stairs are some of kind of the keys sometimes, and then looking at ceiling height, because if you are throwing implements, if you're lifting heavy objects over your head, you need to have that ceiling clearance. Making sure the flooring is correct. We'll go through all of kind of the details there. Different environmental factors to think in, different lighting, temperature, looking at the electrical service, where your mirrors are placed, safety signs, hydration, rules and guidelines, and safe equipment storage if it's not being used. These are all kind of our checklist to go through. There are specific standards we'll go through, but I want you to start thinking through all of these other things that you may not think about with a facility. These are all kind of running in the background, things that we expect, but we need to make sure we do it correctly at the start and make sure we continue to have correct implementation of all of these safety measures, because safety is our first priority for all of our athletes. So what are some of those guidelines? First one, door width must be at least 63 inches. This is for ease of access with athletes. Large volumes coming in and out, especially with safety hazards, making sure that we can get everyone out, and manage getting equipment in and equipment out. You need to have that minimum door width. Make sure that they are double doors with a removable middle post so that we can get access for equipment. Emergency facilities, emergency personnel, make sure that we have ease of access there. The ceiling height should be at least 12 feet, preferably something closer to 14 or higher. The higher ceiling is not going to hurt you, but a lower ceiling can cause some issues, especially with lighting. So making sure a minimum of 12 feet, especially if you have taller athletes, putting things over their head, we want to be as safe as possible. Make sure our flooring is rubber or carpeted. Rubberized surfaces are best. Carpeted surfaces are okay, but it's better than we don't want to have a concrete floor surface. We don't want to have a whole floor that is wood. Our platforms should be wood, if possible, for the best safety with the athletes, especially if we have those wooden platforms. It shouldn't be too glossed or too slick, so that we don't have that risk of athletes slipping and sliding. We want to make sure that the floor has a grip, and make sure that we are using safe facilities. When it comes to temperature, maintaining temperature, especially in the heat, we want to make sure that our facility can stay somewhere between 68 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. This is kind of the general good window. The more athletes that you have circulating through your facility, the hotter it is going to get. You may have to maintain a lower temperature. Or if it is hotter outside, we live in Bakersfield, it's going to get hot. We want to make sure that the facility is keeping us in this nice general safe zone. If it's getting too hot, we have a higher risk of overheating with our athletes. We want to make sure that we maintain the humidity under 60%. Where we live, that's not as much of an issue, but if we look at other places like the Midwest, this may be more of an issue. Air circulation, these are kind of other keys. If you're going for certification, these are things that you do need to know. Air circulation between 12 to 15 exchanges per hour. Your mirrors should be 20 inches above the floor. This allows safety of athletes moving, and if things are rolling, like a plate is rolling down the floor, you don't want it to crash into a mirror. You don't want those mirrors in places where we can hit them with different objects, medicine balls, other implements. We want to keep the mirrors safe because we don't want to break one. Glass everywhere, another safety hazard for our athletes. And then we should have our equipment, if we have equipment like dumbbells or other racks, they should be at least 6 inches away from those mirrors to limit the chance of making contact. There should always be a telephone in the facility. This is for safety of the athletes. If you need to contact emergency personnel, you need to make sure there is a phone in the facility, not just a cell phone somewhere. Make sure that there is a hardwired phone. If we have tall machines like cable machines, different pulleys, things that are extremely large, we want to put them closer to the walls. This gives us a less chance of one of them tipping and falling over on some athletes. And another key, all of those barbells should be placed at least 36 inches between ends. So if we have multiple platforms or multiple racks, those barbell ends should be at least 36 inches away from each other. This allows athletes to move in between, ease of loading weights, and there's less of a chance of athletes making contact with each other, especially if they're dropping implements. We don't want implements to bounce over onto another platform, injure another athlete. These are all really there for safety and for easy flow of traffic throughout that weight room and throughout your training sessions. Okay, so how do we arrange the equipment once we have it? We first need to find within that space where to place this equipment. Depends on what equipment you have. If you have platforms, making sure the ends of the barbells are 36 inches away from each other, making sure that those platforms are spaced out adequately. We don't want those platforms too close to each other. Make sure that we have space for athletes to walk, making sure that we have space that in case things are moving, things are falling, that we're not going to injure anyone, and making sure there's an easy flow of traffic. If we're training, we want to make sure that our facility can accommodate our training sessions and making sure there's easy flow. We don't want to put cardiovascular equipment next to weight training racks, next to stretching area. Make sure there's no place where athletes are on the ground near where implements may be falling. We want to take all of these into account. We want to maybe set up a stretching or warm-up area away from our heavier implements, our weights, our barbells, our bumper plates. Make sure there's some open space, especially if you're going to do any kind of dynamic activities. Make sure there's free space for things like plyometrics, throwing, different things like that. We want to make sure there's open space where we can accommodate that. Or if we're doing open space dumbbell work, places for benches, places for free weights, and making sure those weightlifting platforms are separated from that area. We don't want to be walking across platforms to grab dumbbells, walking back across, especially if we have a large volume of athletes within the facility. We want to make this flow as easy as we can. And then maybe if we have space, adding in maybe like an aerobic area where we have bikes or treadmills, Aerodyne bikes or anything like that, where they are placed away from our training facility or training areas with heavier, more dangerous implements, and kind of get that nice, easy flow so that we can circulate athletes extremely efficient. Okay, so now that we've designed that facility, we have everything there, we need to schedule our training sessions. Kind of a good way to go about it is to start with those in-season take full priority. Because they have a season set out, they have their games, they have their competitions laid out, and we want to accommodate those because they are competing and that's what matters to us. We want the competition to be the best. So they get priority so that they can get most recovery, get those optimum hours. Make sure that we plan around those peak hours because there are peak hours like early mornings and midday are often peak hours for training because it accommodates most class schedules. You'll often won't see very many late evening training sessions, or we try to avoid that, especially if we have early morning sessions. If you have more staff, you can accommodate a greater spread, but we want to make sure that we're organizing around those peak hours because we want that traffic to flow well, and we don't want teams to butt up against each other. We don't want a large volume team like track and field to also be training at the same time as another large volume team like softball or baseball. Or a football program, making sure that you can accommodate all of them. This goes into how you schedule your staff. At different levels, there are different recommendations. For high school, it's about 1 to every 15 athletes, so 1 coach to 15 athletes. Middle school, 1 to 10. And the highest recommendation is 1 to 50. This is kind of the minimum standard. If you have to, you shouldn't have more than 50 athletes with you as the only coach. That becomes unsafe, it becomes hazardous for the athletes and for you as the coach with all of this liability, with all of these athletes moving around. You can't watch all of them, you can't coach all of them. So the smaller that coach to athlete ratio, the better for quality coaching, quality training. Okay? Because we do need supervision, this is key, and quality instruction. This is our goal. This is our job, is to supervise and give quality instruction. In season, it's often mostly supervision, making sure that they're getting in what they need to do, doing it safely. And then in those off-season periods, we're often spending more time with quality instruction, teaching the athletes how to perform the lifts, how to perform their movements, how to learn how to move well. Especially with younger athletes, we can develop them into where we only need to supervise or coach at a small extent. But we need to plan for, if we're giving more quality instruction, we may need less athletes in the room. If we just need to supervise, make sure that they're getting through what they need to, their experience, maybe they're older or maybe they're more experienced in the weight room, we can kind of leave them on, give them some autonomy. We'll talk about that in the coaching section, but make sure that we limit the athletes when we have smaller numbers of coaches. The more coaches you have, the easier you can have more athletes in the same facility. Right? Now more with safety. I talked a lot about safety and where we put things, but we need to make sure that we maintain and clean our equipment, checking the equipment, making sure things aren't cracked, things aren't breaking, make sure that the barbells are spinning well, make sure that the dumbbells are placed back where they need to be, cleaned and maintained. The better you can clean and maintain your facility, the safer, especially now we're talking about things like viruses. We want to make sure that we have a clean and safe facility for the athletes. And we need to maintain it so that it is of quality appearance. When those athletes walk in, they should see the best quality layout that you can. It shows that you have a standard and it brings them up to a new standard. So we want to maintain that equipment for safety reasons and for the quality of our program. Make sure that you do also have an emergency care plan in case someone does get injured. Make sure that you have an action plan. Make sure all of your staff understand the process through that action plan so that you can keep everyone safe. And if there is an acute injury, you know where to go and you know who to call. And then also record everything. Similar to with our training, with our testing, we always record injuries, record your cleaning processes, your maintenance, your warranties. Because when someone does get hurt, you want to make sure that you have a record of how you tried to prevent that injury. Every step you took to make sure that that shouldn't happen. So when it does, that liability doesn't fall back on you. Right? Now let's develop some policies, some procedures, because there are unfortunately a lot of legal terms and legal aspects of strength and conditioning, especially when it comes to liability. Liability is your legal responsibility, your obligation, which is to keep your athletes safe. You're supposed to keep your athletes safe. Your job is to keep them safe and help them improve. That's really the basis of your job. So making sure that you report and you maintain all of your equipment so that it is safe, and you're recording all injuries, recording all cleaning, making sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that everything is right and in best quality for your athletes. There's also standards of care. We want to make sure that we don't put anyone in harm's way. There is a standard, there's a reasonable standard for us, and we need to make sure that we stay to or above that standard, because if we fall below that standard, we fall kind of into this negligence standpoint where we're not being responsible, we are not maybe cleaning, we're not keeping things safe, we're causing damage or allowing damage to occur that we should have been preventing. And then we need to make sure that all of our athletes do assume risk or understand that they are assuming risk when it comes to physical activity. We know exercise and physical activity has some inherent risk, making sure they know that, making sure the administration understands that, and that they are voluntarily participating in these activities. So they assume risk, but we also do have to take it onto ourselves to make sure everything is safe, make sure we plan our program well with all of our scientific principles, understand what we're doing, and understand how to keep an athlete safe. If an athlete looks like they're overheating or looks like they're going to hurt themselves, stop them, intervene, be the one to, it's better to intervene and stop something beforehand than it is to say, oh, well, they might be okay. Might is a very high chance of they're getting hurt. And most of these court cases, about 80% of court cases related to strength and conditioning are due to lack of supervision, which falls into that negligence category. If you're not supervising your athletes, you're not doing your job, you're putting them in harm's way. Let's avoid this as much as we possibly can. Right? Other things that we need to think about when it comes to legal aspects, medical clearance, making sure all athletes are cleared to participate in physical activity when they come into your facility. If they haven't gotten all of their waivers cleared, send them back. Okay, send them to someone like your athletic trainer, send them back to their coach. Send them to administration to make sure that they are cleared to participate. If they're not cleared, it's your job to tell them no. You may not want to say no, but you have to say no to keep them safe, because you don't know if they have some underlying condition that could injure them in the future. Making sure that you have your emergency care plan set, that your administration understands that you have this, and everyone in your facility understands the steps and processes when it comes to helping an athlete who is injured or becomes injured. Other things like your record keeping, making sure that all insurance policies are up to date, and making sure that all of your products are insured. If you have different equipment, making sure that all of the warranties are up to date, making sure that they are insured with that equipment, making sure that your administration knows what you have and what are the dangers. And I know it sounds like a lot of kind of legal jargon, but we want to make sure that we go through all of those legal processes so that if an athlete does get hurt, we don't also get hurt as well from a legal standpoint. We want to keep ourselves safe, keep our job safe, keep our university safe, and keep our athletes safe. That's kind of our #1 goal. All right, let's take a little shift gears. We're going to go a little bit into some more process called creating a mission statement. This is our program goals. So now we're kind of past all of this, developing what we have, keeping it safe. Now this is our mission as strength and conditioning coaches. What is our goal? It should be forward thinking, so it should be looking towards the future, what we are going to do, and have an end result in mind of what's the end product we're trying to develop through our strength and conditioning program. Okay, make sure that these mission statements are short and sharply focused. This should be only 1 to a few sentences, clearly understood, defines what you do and why you exist, so that if someone said, okay, what do? You know what your mission is. It has your values instilled, and it does kind of encompass broad enough, but it is specific. I know that sounds a little weird, and it allows you to show what you want to do in the end and make sure everyone understands what your values are, what your goal is, and how you're going to achieve that goal. That how does give you direction. And it helps your athletes understand, the coaches understand, your administration understand your purpose in this zone of athletic performance. I have an example here from your Essentials of Strength and Conditioning book. I took it from the book. It's referenced right there. Here's a mission statement that is to provide to athletes the means by which they can train consistently, sensibly, and systematically over designated periods of time in a safe, clean, and professional environment to help prevent injury and improve athletic performance. Okay, this talks about who you are, what you're trying to do, how you're going to do it, and what the end goal is. And it is sufficiently broad. It doesn't have to say we are going to follow this methodology. We are going to do all of these different focuses. We want to train. We're going to train athletes systematically over a period of time where it is safe, and that is going to help prevent injury and improve athletic performance. Not that it will prevent injuries and will improve athletic performances, but it can help. Okay, we're trying to create an environment to help the athletes. That's the key word there, is safe and help, with our end goals in mind as injury prevention and improving athletic performance. Okay, so if you're developing your mission statement for your focus, we want to look at the program goals to start. Okay, what is the desired end product? In most cases, it is reduce the risk of injury or lessen it as much as possible, and improve athletic performance, improve athletic development, whatever it is for you. Okay, this should be the foundational goal. Improving athletic performance is always our goal as strength and conditioning professionals. We are sports performance enhancers. That's our goal. And injury prevention, I think of injury prevention as improving sports performance. If you're on the field, you can participate. If you're injured, you can't participate. You can't improve if you're not participating. Okay. And then your goals for your program should also align with the athletic administration's goals. If it is develop athletes to be better people, that should align with your missions also. If it is to improve athletic development and academic development, you should have academic factors within your training program. Maybe you're adding in different discussions with methodology, with science, with practical application, with communication. Whatever your administration goals, you should also align with those goals as well, because you are one unit that is there for the athlete. Okay. Our program objectives are similar to our goals, but these are kind of our means of attaining the goals. This is how we're going to get there. So design properly periodized strength training protocols. Following those principles of strength and conditioning we've talked about that we know work and that we know are safe. Maybe it's individualized programs based on the athlete's needs. Educate athletes on the effects of the training. Maybe we're adding that education component. We are at a university level. We want to educate as much as possible. And also educate about dangers. Athletes are going to come up and ask about different substances, different performance enhancing drugs, PEDs, that maybe they heard work, or maybe they heard help, or they don't know if they're safe. They don't know. We want to let them know what those dangers are and give them appropriate recommendations. You may have educate athletes on nutritional habits or improving habits for success. That's a key one for me, is improving habits for success with my athletes. So creating those habits that will have long-term impact on lifelong success. Okay. Now we need to look at other policies and procedures, things to make sure that we think about and integrate into our program. So job titles, job descriptions, make sure they are clear. What is your job? What is your role? What is required? What is expected? Okay, we want to make sure that it is clear and outlined. There's no kind of ambiguity that, oh, maybe it was this, maybe they meant this. It should be extremely clear. Make sure that you have a clear orientation for your athletes so they know the rules. They know what's expected. They know how to keep themselves safe. They know what your job is, what your role is, so that you can improve them. They need to have that built buy-in. They need to understand what is required from them, from the work, the participation standpoint, showing up, whatever the orientation is for you, make sure it's clear and direct. Create your annual plan. We are talking through our annual plan right now with your periodization project. Create the annual plan when it comes to things like budget as well as your training program. Where do you want to go long-term with developing your facility? Where do you want to go with developing your athletes or developing your staff with continuing education? Or other aspects like, what is the eligibility requirement? How do you know if an athlete's able to come into the weight room and train with you? Maybe they're ineligible from academic reasons, or maybe they are suspended from the team for disciplinary actions. I've had athletes that come in and want to participate, and I got a call the night before that said, no, don't let this person walk in. They're suspended for the next 2 weeks. And you have to tell them no, because that's part of your rules. That's part of your procedure. If they walk in and they train, your coach says they can't train, they're suspended. This is against our policy. This is against the university. This is against maybe the NCAA or other governing bodies. Make sure that you have your rules and regulations down and you stick to them, and make sure the rest of your staff also adhere to those rules, adhere to those policies, and work as a unit. Finally, make sure that you are completely prepared for all emergencies. Okay, I come back to this safety over and over with your facility. It doesn't matter how fancy your facility is if it's unsafe. It doesn't matter what it looks like if it's unsafe. It doesn't matter how expensive it is if it's unsafe. Okay, make sure that you are prepared for any emergency, fire, tornado, epidemic or pandemic. Make sure that you have an emergency process available and that you and your staff understand what you need to do to keep your athletes safe and keep them improving. All right, if you have any questions, we'll go through this in our mini review this week in class. But thank you very much for watching, and go through your online quizzes. They should be up by the time you view this video. All right, thank you very much, and keep up the great work.